Chapter 2. Everything is fogged. Chapter 6. The Formula of Humanity. Depending on your perspective, the philosopher Immanuel Kant was either the most boring person who ever lived or a productive hacker's wet dream. For 40 years, he woke up at same morning at 5 o'clock and wrote exactly for 3 hours. He would then lecture at the same university for exactly 4 hours and then eat a lunch at the same restaurant every day. Then in the afternoon, he would go on exact walk through the same park on the same route, leaving and returning home at the exact same time. He did it for the 40 years, every single day. Kant was efficiently personified. He was so mechanical in his habit that his neighbor joked that they could set their clock by when he left his apartment. He would depart for a daily walk at 3:30 in the afternoon, have a dinner with the same friend most evening, and after walking some more, he would go to bed at exactly 10 every night. Despite sounding like a colossal bore, Kant was one of the most important and influential thinkers in all history, and from his single-room apartment in Königsberg, Prussia, he did more stir the whole than most kings, president, prime minister, or the general before and since. If you living in a democratic society that protect individual freedom, you have Kant partially to thank for that. He was one of the first to argue that all people have an inherent dignity that must be regarded and respected. He was the first person. He was the first person to envision a global governing body that could guarantee peace across much of the world, an idea that would eventually inspire the formation of United Nations. His description of how we perceive space and time would later help inspire Einstein's discovery of the theory of relativity. He was one of the first to suggest the possibility of animal rights. He reinvented the philosophy of aesthetic and beauty. He resolved the 200 years old philosophical debate between rationalism and empiricism in the span of couple hundred pages. And if and as if all the weren't enough, he reinvented moral philosophy from top to bottom, overthrowing idea and had been the basic of Western civilization since the Aristotle. Kant was an intellectual powerhouse. If thinking brain has biceps, Kant thinking brain was the Mr. Olympia for the intellectual universe. As with his lifestyle, Kant was rigid and uncompromising in the view of the world. He believed that there was a clear right and wrong, a value system that transcends and operates outside any human emotion or feeling brain judgment. Moreover, he lived the what we preached. King tries to censor him, priest condemned him, academics invade him, yet none of his shot him down. Kant did. Kant did not give a fuck, and I mean that in the trusted the trust, trust and profoundest sense of the phrase. He is the only thinker I have ever come across who skewed hope and plowed human values it relied upon, who confronted the uncomfortable truth and refused to accept its horrible implication, who gazed into abysses with nothing but logic and pure reason, who, armed with only the brilliance of his mind, stood before the god and challenged them and somehow won. But to understand Kant's Herculean struggle, first we must take a detour and learn about the psychological development, maturity, and adulthood. How to grow up. When I was when I was like 4 year old, despite my mother warning me not 2. I put my finger on the hot stove. That day I learned an important lesson. Really hot things shock. They burn you, and you want to avoid touching them again, ever again. Around the same time, I made another important discovery. Ice cream was stored in the freezer on shelf that could easily access if I stood on the tippy toes. One day, while my mother was in the other room, poor mom, I grabbed the ice cream, sat on the floor, and proceeded to gorge myself using my bare hand. It was the closest I would come to an orgasm for the another 10 years. If there was a heaven in my life, in my little 4-year-old mind, I had just found it. My own little Elysium in bucket of cogulated divinity. As the ice cream began to melt, I smeared an extra helping across my face, letting it dribble all over my shirt. This was all happening in slow motion, of course. I was practically bathing in the sweet and tasty goodness. Oh, yes, glorious sugary milk. Share with me your secret, for today I shall know greatness. Then mom walked in, and all the hell broke loose, while included, but was not limited to much needed bath. I learned a couple of lessons that day on stealing ice cream and then dumping it all over yourself and the kitchen floor make your mother extremely angry and two angry mothers shock. They scold you, punish you. That day, much like the day with the hot stove, I learned what not to do. What not to do. But there was a third meta lesson being taught here. One of those lessons that are so obvious we don't even notice when they happen. A lesson that was far more important than the other lesson. Eating ice cream is better than being born. This lesson was important because it was a value judgment. Ice cream is better than hot stove. I prefer surgery sweetness. I prefer I prefer sugary sweetness in my mouth than a bit of fire on my hand. It was a discovery of preference and therefore prioritization. It was my feeling brain's decision that one brain is the old was better than another. The construction of my early value hierarchy. A friend of mine once described the parenthood as basically just following around a kid for a couple decades and making sure he does not accidentally kill himself. A friend of mine once described the parenthood of basically just following around a kid for a couple decades and making sure he does not accidentally kill himself. And you would be amazed how many ways a kid can find to accidentally kill himself. Young children are always looking for a new way to accidentally kill themselves because the driving force behind their psychology is exploration. Early in life, we are driven to explore the world around us because our feeling brain are collecting information on what please and harm us, what feels good and bad, what is worth pursuing further, and what is worth avoiding. We are building up our value hierarchy, figuring out what our first and primary values are, so that we can begin to know that to hope for. Eventually, the exploratory phase exhausts itself, and not because we run out of the hole to explore. Actually, it's the opposite of exploratory phase wrap up because as we become older, we begin to recognize that there is too much world to explore. We can't touch and taste everything. We can't meet all the people. We can't see all the things. There is too much potential experience and the sheer magnitude of our own existence overwhelms and intimidate us. Therefore, therefore, ah, oh, Therefore, our two brain began to focus less on trying everything and more on developing some rules to help us navigate the endless complexity of the world before us. We adopt most of the three rules from our parents and teachers, but many of them we figure out for ourselves. For instance, after walking around near open flames enough, you develop a little mental rule that all flames are dangerous, not just a stove one. And after seeing mom get pissed off even enough time, you begin to figure out that raiding the freezer and stealing dessert is always bad, not just when it's ice cream.